Hello everyone, we are back. We're back in the studio. We got another fun video that a bunch of you guys actually requested, which is what are some of my favorite guitars, what are my top 5 picks of guitars that are under $1,000 that are still really, really good. We did a video quite a while ago now actually on top guitars under 500. And I think the most frequent comment was, hey, what if you spend just a little bit more? Like, what are some of the best things you can get? I mentioned this in the previous video, but in today's guitar economy, there is certainly less choices for around $500 than there used to be. There still is some good ones, so that was obviously a fun video to do. But I mentioned if you push just a little bit more, you get into the $800 to $1,000 range, there's some really, really great pro level instruments that can last you a lifetime. And today we are going to talk about some of those guitars. Let's get into it. So number 5 is not a super common guitar, but it's not a hard one to find on like Reverb or wherever. And that is a Fender Japan standard Stratocaster or Telecaster. They're both about the same price, so whichever you prefer. This is a line that was made in Japan pretty much exclusively for the Japanese market. That was kind of similar to what we have for our Fender Mexico standard Stratocasters and Telecasters, but it was just done there with Japanese craftsmanship, which honestly kind of blows away what they're doing in Mexico. These run just a little bit more than the Fender Mexico standard series guitars, but I think that they punch a little bit higher. I think the Japanese craftsmanship really pushes them into the next echelon, and they're really, really cool. And I think they're worth that little bit extra that you're gonna pay for them. These guitars are nothing crazy. They're just kind of a good straight ahead, reliable Strat or Tele. I personally prefer the more vintage style ones, of course, but those are all pushing over 1,000 for the most part these days. So I couldn't include those in the list, but the standard series stuff is still really good. I think it does a great job of bridging the difference between like a Mexico standard and an American standard. I think it sits right in the middle. They're great guitars, they're great value, and you could play them and play them hard for a very long time and they will do you very well. Staying in the theme of made in Japan, number 4 is a guitar that we have been absolutely flooded with recently, and that is the Ibanez Roadstar 2. We literally have gotten like a dozen of these in the last 6 months, which is absolutely crazy. I actually wrote this list before we started getting so many of them in, so I promise I do really like these guitars. It's not just because we have a bunch. We've got more Roadstars than we'll probably ever need. But these are really, really cool guitars. They're not super shreddy like a lot of Ibanez guitars. They kind of bridge the gap between like an Ibanez and a Fender. Super comfortable necks, nice dark rosewood boards when applicable, and just great craftsmanship across the board. These are starting to become somewhat collectible, but there's just so many of them out there that they haven't necessarily become rare. So you can still find some really good deals. I know we often sell these for like 600 or even less if it's beat up. So these are great guitars, really good value for your money, and I would absolutely recommend checking one out if you run into one in person. So number 3 is a guitar that's super, super easy to find, and this is the PRS SE Custom 22. In the same way I said about the Strat or Tele from Fender Japan, you can get a Custom 22 or a Custom 24 about the same price, so just whatever your preference is. They're both great. They're both made to the same level of quality. I absolutely love these guitars. They're really, really consistent. Every time we get a PRS SE Custom 22, I'm always just kind of surprised, like, wow, this is really, really good. It actually holds up pretty well against like a Core or S2 PRS made in the States. Obviously, it's not all the way there. It's not as good as those, but for the price, you really can't beat these. They stay in tune really, really well. They intonate nicely, and just PRS just does a really good job of offering like a great guitar in this price point. It's very accessible, but it will do everything you need it to. You can gig it, you can record with it, and it'll do the thing. And at that price point, if it can do that, then you really can't complain. If you spend a little bit more money, still under 1,000, but a little more than your standard Custom 22 or Custom 24, you can get some really cool finishes. I know we recently had this green one that was really, really rad and still stayed well under that budget, so that was cool. But yeah, great line of guitars, one of my absolute favorite import lines of guitars. I highly recommend them if it's something that you are considering. So number 2 is a guitar that I have in my personal collection. Kaylee also has in her collection, and that is the Fender Classic Series 72 reissue Telecaster Deluxe. These guitars are made in Mexico, and they are absolutely awesome. They're pretty much like my favorite thing that comes from Fender Mexico. Really everything from the Classic Series is really, really great. There's some awesome Teles, Strats, even some cool Jaguars and some other cool stuff. You know, the Jazzmasters are great too. I didn't even think about that when I was writing the script, but those are also really, really cool guitars. But for me, the one that's under 1,000 that is the best and just the coolest to me is that Telecaster Deluxe. It's a fairly faithful recreation of the classic 1972 Telecaster Deluxe with wide range humbuckers. They sound really good, and because these guitars are so common, there's also all kinds of like replacement parts. You can get a pick guard that is ready for like standard size humbuckers like Seymour Duncan's and kind of throw in whatever you want. These are super solid. You can take them out, beat 'em up. They'll hold up really, really well. I know both me and Kaylee have toured the heck out of ours and they still are playing great to this day. If you go get one, I'm sure it will do the same for you. I would certainly recommend checking out basically everything from that classic series from Fender. They don't make it anymore. The Venturas series replaced it, but I really, really like those guitars. I do like the Venturas too, but there was just something special with those older classic series MIM Fenders. They definitely get the job done, and for the price they demand on the used market right now, I would say they're a very, very good investment. So my honorable mention is one that definitely requires a good amount of discretion, which is why I didn't put it on this list, but that is finding a Gibson with a headstock brake. If you can find a Gibson that has been repaired correctly, that previously had a break or a crack or something, these can be like the absolute best value on the market. My favorite Les Paul that I own is a 1995 Les Paul, technically called a Junior 2, but it's a standard Les Paul special with a Tune-o-matic bridge and TV yellow. This thing is absolutely awesome. It has been fixed properly. It's actually been splined. And it's very obvious as it has this 2 black stripes on the back of the headstock, but it's super solid. I have flown it in a road case many, many times and I've never had to worry. It plays great, it holds up great. I love this guitar and I got it for under $1,000, and there's plenty of examples out there of guitars with headstock brakes that you can get within that budget, a punch way, way, way above their price class. If you can get over the fact that it's not perfect, it's had some work done, as long as it's been done right, these can be really solid. They could even be more durable than before they were repaired if they were splined. So that's pretty cool. Obviously, these guitars with headstock brakes are going to sell for notably less than those without one. So if you buy it, you're probably only gonna get back probably what you paid for it, unless you got a crazy deal on it. So don't expect to like go resell it for more later, but hopefully it'll still hold its value if you get into it for the right price. So if you find a deal, everything lines up and they're honest about it, I personally wouldn't pass just because of the headstock brake, as long as that is well factored into the price. All right, so my number 1 pick, and I'll fully admit that I'm a little bit biased here because this was the first like nice guitar that I saved up my money for and bought. That is the Gibson SG Special Faded, or they now call it the Gibson SG Tribute. We actually have one right here. This is not the one I used to have. We'll put a picture on the screen now. Here's me playing at a school talent show, playing some Green Day song. I saved up forever for this guitar. I mowed lots of lawns and did all kinds of other stuff to make it happen. $435 later, back in like 2008 or 9 or whenever that was, I got my first American Gibson, and that was it. I've been hooked on Gibsons ever since. I will note these go for a lot more than that now. Prices have certainly changed, but these are still well worth the kind of $800 to $1,000 they go for now. These are really, really solid guitars. They don't have like a thick gloss finish, so they're going to wear quite a bit pretty quickly, but I think that's cool. They look kind of relict if you really take them out and beat them up. Really, really great sounding guitars. For Gibson, they still stay in tune very, very well. So what's not to love? The stock pickups sound great on these. They're very like mid output, but plug it into a great amp and you will not be disappointed. I personally prefer the older ones, but it might just be because that's what I started with. The newer ones have a maple neck, whereas the older ones have a mahogany neck. So it's a little different. It's whatever your personal preference is. I like the mahogany, but both are cool. As well as SGs, there is a few other guitars in the Gibson Faded series that you can still find in this price range. Unfortunately, most things are now going for over $1,000 and some well over $1,000. I know the double cut juniors, which I love, go for like $2,000 plus now, even though they were priced similarly to these back in the day. It's crazy to see even like the new Gibson Rick Beato signature is actually not much different than a guitar like this, yet it will go for $2,000 new. So that is just kind of where we are at in the guitar market right now. The SGs have still stayed under $1,000, so that's kind of why I recommended this one. But really anything in that line is cool. I even like the Les Paul Studios from that line, even though I'm actually not a big Les Paul Studio guy, but the ones I like are the faded ones. Once we get into gloss Les Pauls, I like to go up to a classic or a standard, but that's just personal preference for me. But yeah, any of those Gibson faded specials, any of that stuff you can find under $1,000, gets my seal of approval, definitely a good buy. This was of course not a definitive list. This was just some things that came to mind when I was thinking about guitars that are really, really cool. You can still take them on the road, you can gig with them, you can record with them, you can kind of check all the boxes, and they're pro level instruments, but they're not a crazy price. These are some ones I thought of, but I know there's so many more out there, so please Comment down below what some of your recommendations are for the best guitars you can find right now for under $1,000. I can't wait to read the comments and see your guys' suggestions. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share the video with your friends, and all the other good stuff. It really does help us out. And as always, we will see you in another video soon. Bye.